Welcome back to Tiny Grimes Game, and I'm here with another Star Wars Destiny video. And yes, today I'm bringing you the long overdue, long awaited Kylo Dooku deck. Now, this is a deck that I won a few tournaments with. I rattled off something like a 15-game win streak with. But then, something bad happened. I lost the game. I played against Nick, a guy I met at a tournament who's from San Diego. He came up to Los Angeles. He beat me with a mirror and sort of showed me a little change I could make. And then I had a week, and this is going to be a whole nother video, where I actually lost 7 straight games. Mostly due to RNG situations of dice and cards not quite going my way. And it was really frustrating. I was starting to think, what can I do about this? And from these games, actually, this deck evolved. So, 2 things on this. First, this is actually going to be an evolution video, so it's probably going to be a little longer than normal. It's going to be a deep look at this deck, and then also how it's evolved over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's also a really good reminder that winning a lot of games is bad for you. Now, if you're in a tournament, winning all your games is great, right? But I found Kylo Dooku, and I tweaked it, and I was really happy with it, and it won a whole truckload of games in a row. And it really caused me to stop innovating the deck and really start thinking, okay, how do I play this optimally rather than what are the cards I need to be innovating? And really, you're never done innovating. And I know certainly I am not, and this is probably not even the last incarnation of this deck or even close. It's almost a new beginning, if you will. So let's go ahead and take a look at Kylo Dooku and what makes it so great. First thing, 4 dice, all melee, all good. That's really hard to pull off for, only a 30-point cost. It has a ton of health. It looks like it's only 21. It's more like 26. Dooku is a pain to kill. Kylo's not that easy to melt, even for Jango decks and the like. And while Kylo's dice at first look bad, it's actually 3 damage sides. It's 3 damage sides. It's a resource. It's a shield. They're not bad, and against some decks, that special is bonkers good. If you're playing against a Poe deck, if you're playing against some sort of Hyperloop deck, if you're playing against like a Jabba late game Force Powers deck, there's a lot of decks in the meta that this is really great against. What it's really bad against is Jango. The special is not good against Jango. When you play Jango decks, you go, oh man, Kylo, why do you have to suck so bad? And that's just how life works. Dooku, on the other hand, also has amazing dice. His damage might not look that profound at 1 and 2, but the bottom line is having 4 base sides means you can play stuff like tons of lightsabers. That's one of the changes I made, is that I went to 4 lightsabers, because now all these plus sides have something to combo with. You're very rarely running just an augmented side. And then you also have the focus, which is amazing. The discard is very rarely used, but you know what? Sometimes it is. They get down to 2, they got to re-roll, and you discard their cards, and they go, oh, right. Yeah, no, I can't re-roll. That's terrible. Bottom line, though, is you have a lot of raw power with these dice. What you don't have is burst early. So you really are reliant on getting weapons out. So just a spoiler, if you want to counter this deck, a really great way to do it is very early resource control. If you can do something like put a holdout blaster on Rey, roll out Han, roll the 2 disrupt sides for the first 2 turns of the game, Kylo Dooku doesn't do a lot, right? It kind of sits there going, all right, I'll hit you for 2 this turn. Next turn, I'll hit you for 1. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's move on. It's not really how this deck wants to play. It wants to put stuff out, and it wants to build up and be able to wreck you from there. All right, so we're starting with my original list before we move into the evolution. The original list had these as the main melee weapons. Kylo's saber is bananas good right now. Hey, Qui-Gon, what's up? You're screwed. All your shields are gone. Oh, Han, that's awesome. You're getting shields every turn? Thank you. I'll be pulling them. Oftentimes if I get a turn 1 Kylo's lightsaber, I think the game's over. It's not always the case, but it usually is. A regular lightsaber is also very good. One of the things that I've noticed more and more is Dooku with a lightsaber at the end of the game is great. Dooku with 3 lightsabers at the end of the game is insane. Force Draining is another good card because it has the 2 melee side. It is not a card I end up using late game. It's a card that I use in the early game. I might play it if I have to, if I don't have a holocron. Maybe I get it out for free and then overwrite it with a lightsaber. But essentially it has a whole bunch of melee. And as we'll look at the evolution, it moves to even more melee. In addition to melee, of course, you have the force powers, the holocron suite. Adding force training to this mix, that's a lot of powers. We're looking at 9 for the holocron. So if you get a holocron early, you have a huge advantage. I'm not going to say you win, but boy, the advantage is so large because they either have to control it every turn or this particular deck will always get something free. And free upgrades is just crazy. And a note is, whatever character they go for, you load up the other one. So what I love to do is something like play Kylo, put a holocron on him turn 1 and go, there you go, there's your target, go kill Kylo. And they're like, I wanted to kill Dooku first, but he's impossible to kill anyway. Fine, I will go for Kylo since you've told me to. And then I just throw everything onto Dooku and he ruins their world. Now if they go for Dooku first, you throw everything onto Kylo. Either way, you get this crazy endgame where you have force powers, lightsabers, things like that. So one of the keys to this deck is that even though it's only a mono deck, it's only mono blue, it still has a ton of removal options. Mono blue has a lot. Deflect is just flat out one of the best cards in the game right now because you see Django so often. Isolate is amazing for the cards that aren't Django, right? So like Vader's really scary. Okay, well, isolate your die. It's not scary anymore. Poe's really scary with a special. Okay, I'll isolate that. So that's really good. And then Feel Your Anger is great against these decks that want to put a lot of dice out, like a Django Bala Trooper deck that wants to roll tons of dice, miss, roll tons more, and then you just go, I'll anger 3 of those. So it basically has an answer for everything. Abandon All Hope is just a good card. I mean, like, it just wrecks Crime Lord decks, and it wrecks things that want to save up for launch base. Anything that wants to save up, Abandon All Hope just destroys all their hopes and dreams. I've won many a game off of this card. It's very good. Mind Trick is the card that I hate. I just hate Mind Trick. And I'm not saying it's a bad card. I'm saying I feel like good players play around it pretty easily. I've had a very few scenarios where a Mind Trick has completely blown me out. There's been a couple. But almost every time when they play Mind Trick, you're just like, okay, so you need to pull this die or these 2 dice. So all the other dice go over here. Now make your decision. So you give them tough decisions, but it is more removal. Dodge is that late game, just total blowout, right? Especially against, say, Han after Rey's already dead. They go, whoa, +3, 3, 2, +3, and you go, I'll dodge everything. And then they cry. Use the Force is a really versatile card, you know, allowing you to either use it defensively or offensively. The problem is I don't love this card because it's so slow. Being able to turn one of their cards to a blank without a lot of discard in the deck, it's kind of not that helpful, right? It's almost like a Band-Aid, right? Like, I've got this gaping wound, I'm going to use the Force on it, and then they re-roll and the wound opens back up. It doesn't work that well defensively. Now, if they run out of cards, then it can work really well either offensively or defensively. I like the card. I'm not a huge fan. So this is the initial suite of removal that I was using. As you'll see, this is where some of the changes went. Big shocker, Mind Trick I don't like, so it left. All right, so there is also, of course, more ways to do stuff. Enrage is just a great card. I think you either want Binds All Things or Enrage. I currently like Enrage better, and here's my theory, that with Kylo Dooku, one of them is going to die, probably Kylo, pretty quick, right? He's going to die in 2 turns, 3 turns. Oh my goodness, if you get lucky and he goes 4 turns, you win. All right, so with that being the case, you play a Binds. Let's say you don't get a turn 1. Let's say you're not the luckiest person in the world. You get a turn 2. You've already put 1 upgrade on the person that's going to live. Now, it's only going to get 2 great uses, and that's how many it takes to get ahead, right? So if you only use it once, it's just a wash. So you're basically going to save yourself 1 gold to lose tempo to get it out and to have a card that is essentially a dead card in your deck later in the game. The cool thing about Enrage is it's never really a dead card. Like, yeah, it might not be amazing late game, but there's been tons of times where you have something like they control all your stuff, but they leave you with, say, a lightsaber with a 3 side showing and the dollar because you have no money. being able to enrage out of nowhere to do three damage can be really useful. I just find it basically to be a more flexible but more limited in use and scope binds, right? Like what I mean is it's a one-time usage. You get a one-time reduction. But if you're only going to get basically a one resource advantage out of a binds anyway, then Enrage is a wash. And if you get binds late game, it's completely useless. Even if you get it like late mid game, it can be useless. So I personally like Enrage better. I love Intimidate. I think Intimidate is an amazing card. I would love to put two of them in all my decks, but it's a situational card that I usually don't have room for two, especially if I'm running Kylo Saber already that's doing a similar job. It can just be so useful in a whole bunch of scenarios. You know, they shield up and you don't have Kylo Saber, and just being able to intimidate and then do damage is great. It's also really great for something like they shield up in a weird spot where it's kind of like they're probably going to riposte me. That guy's almost dead or whatever. It looks like a riposte moment. You just intimidate. And you can see in their face if they have riposte because they're like, I mean, that's fine. No problem. Power of the Force is a weird card. Because it's mono blue, you might think, tiny. You play two binds. You play two Power of the Force. You roll a 1 and you turn into 6 and you go home laughing. And yeah, that's great. Like, that can happen. Believe me, that can happen. But that's not the norm. Like I said, I tend to not load up either Kylo or Dooku depending on who the target is. Like, the bottom line for me is, if Kylo is dying, even putting something cheap on him is usually not worth it. I'll just keep the money and spend it elsewhere. I'll spend it on damage or I'll spend it on an event. It's just not worth it for me. So Power of the Force tends to be a 3. And while a 3 is good for one, it's not as amazing, right? Because you have to have damage on the board, and it's a slight augment. So I still like the card. I just don't love the card in this particular deck. No Mercy is a card that it's just amazing. I only had one in my initial builds, and my thought was this. There's not a lot of decks I need to burst down with Kylo Dooku. It's more of a consistent turn-by-turn damage that's going to wear you out before you can wear it out. And if you have two in your deck, you're very likely to get one early when you can't use it, and it's a dead card. All of these statements are true still. However, as the evolution of this deck has moved on, more and more I've realized that you just want that late game burst, right? Like, you just want it. Once you have all your upgrades on your guy and your money is being used for mitigation and damage, being able to threaten or know in the back of your head, like, all right, there's only 8 cards left. You know, one of these is a no mercy. I have an out here to say kill that Han with second chance and be able to, you know, get the 1 to knock it off or the 2 to knock it off and then burst through the remaining 5 with 1 die is incredibly useful to have and to know you have. And to even to be able to do it mid-game. You know, they roll out their Django who needs 3 and they think they're safe, and you just no mercy him out of nowhere, and they're like, oh, no, now Janko's dead. So no mercy to me is a really good card, and I'll talk about the evolution in a moment. All right, so the battlefield I use is Mos Eisley Spaceport. You might think, hey, whoa, this is a throne room deck. Dude, look at all the awesome specials, and that's true. That's so true. The problem is this is a slow deck. When you're rolling 4 dice and then you're putting upgrades on them, and they're sort of all kinds of different things. Some of them are specials. You want resources. You want to play mitigation. You're resolving damage. It's just a little bit dangerous to have a double-sided battlefield. Also, I want to be able to have the option just to choose theirs and get the shields. Like, I almost always choose theirs and just take the shields. Dooku with 12 health is almost unkillable. So I really generally choose my opponent's battlefield, and this is fine. If it's this one, I can return holocrons to my hand. It's fine. I just tend to not want it to be double-sided because this deck has the option to run slow. It has the option to run fast, but it also has the option to run slow. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at what the evolution of this deck has looked like. This deck right here, I'm going to scroll out for a second. This deck is great. This deck has won nearly every game it's played. I think it's something like 17-3 or 20-4, some absurd number. It's been great. It's won tournaments. It's a great deck. However, great is not good enough. Let's be honest. Great is not good enough. You want better than great. You want amazing. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next incarnation. All right, so here it is. Here is the new Kylo Dooku deck at a glance. I'm not going to go through every card by card because we just did that, but I will go over the changes real quick. So let's go ahead and focus in on what's different. As I already said, a big difference is more lightsabers. While an endgame scenario of Kylo Saber, and Force Throw was great, Kylo Saber is utterly terrifying as you're always rolling damage. And now if you're always rolling a little bit of damage, you're always having a 1 on the table or something like that. What becomes better? Well, we already talked about what becomes better. No Mercy becomes better. So a second No Mercy has gone in here for that late game push. But you know what else I put in here? It looks crazy. 2 Force Strikes. And the bottom line is, more and more I've been realizing that you need to have outs for when the dice don't go your way. Let's say late game, you have Dooku and 3 lightsabers, and you roll Snake Eyes, right? Or you just roll 1 damage on one of your dice. It feels terrible. And it doesn't feel like it should happen, but it does happen sometimes. And you need outs. And so I basically have upped it to where I have 5 outs against the scenario. I can power the Force for 3. I can No Mercy that 1 die into probably 5 damage. Or I can just resolve that 1 and then turn my lightsaber, which is a blank, for only 2 resources. The 1 to play Force Strike and the 1 on the damage side. 3 damage for 2 money sounds too much, but it's not when it kills a guy or when it's late game and you just need damage. I've had a whole bunch of scenarios where I've surprised people because no one expects Force Strike in Kylo Dooku because, well, it sounds insane. But I think actually it's right. I think it's quite worth even doing 2 damage sometimes for 1. Yeah, it's amazing on Vader, but if you can turn Dooku to the 2 side for 1 and kill a guy or do some damage out of nowhere that's going to be impactful, it can be very useful. So essentially I've moved up, the melee weapons, I've moved up the direct damage, I've moved up opportunities to do burst and to do damage out of nowhere wherever possible. And it's not just unique to this deck. This is something I've been doing with all my decks, and I'm going to make another video about that later in the week. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to expand my deck size to make these changes, so cuts had to be made. And I went ahead and cut a couple of the cards that I like and are situational, but aren't quite good enough. And so, Abandon All Hope, Mind Trick, and Use the Force, 1 copy, all got the axe. They're all useful cards, but what's better? Damage or cards that are situationally useful? I've just decided I think being able to do more and more burst is useful. Now, if you're keeping careful track at home, you noticed, wait, Tiny, there's 1 more card. You added 4 and you only cut 3. The last one is a Force Choke. Now, Force Choke's a great card. Like, it's just an amazing all-around card. It does everything. But this might sound crazy. I don't really love this card anymore. I love it in certain decks, right? If you want a deck where you're doing any sort of resource denial, it's amazing. If you want to have a mill as a very viable opportunity, it's great. If you want to have a late game control deck where you're like, I'm going to roll a bunch of specials. I'm going to roll out Dooku and go Force Throw, Force Throw, Force Choke. What you got now? That's amazing. But the bottom line is, I don't love Force Choke in this deck. I needed to make a cut somewhere, and it needed to be from an upgrade. And so the obvious choice would have been Immobilize, right? Like, well, Force Choke at least does a damage, controls a die. But I actually like Immobilize better in this deck because it keeps people alive, right? Getting a shield or 2 every turn or turning a die to a blank, it gives you that option where you're probably not taking damage. And to be honest, I rarely use this for the turn a die to a blank. The only time I will is if it's a very obvious scenario. Like they have only the 1 base damage and several damage based on that are the plus sides. And I know if I just turn that 1 base, I'll be fine. But I'm not even going to do it if they have like 3 more cards in hand because they're just going to roll it back. So even in that circumstance, if I have the 2 shields showing, I may just say, screw it, I'll take the 2 shields, minimize the damage for sure instead of a maybe not. Maybe it's just a little band-aid for a moment. I really like Immobilize for that reason. Being able to give Dooku or Kylo more shields is incredibly useful. All right, so the bottom line is, with this deck, I feel like what makes it so good is it's well balanced. It has quite a bit of mitigation. It has a lot of burst damage. It has a whole bunch of cheating stuff. You get holocrons and totally broken cards like Force Throws and Mind Probes for free. You've got Dooku saying, oh yeah, really? You're going to ping me for 2 every turn? That's going to take you an eternity because I'm just going to discard 1 and block it every single time. So killing Dooku becomes a real challenge until the end game. Until you can do a big burst, he's very hard to kill. What the real question is who do you kill first? Do you kill Kylo first or do you kill Dooku first? Now, I don't actually always know the answer to this. I think a lot of it depends on your deck. How much damage can you do? How fast? How long do you need the game to go? Because if you dedicate yourself to killing Dooku, you do a couple things. You control their hand. The problem is, early game, Dooku doesn't care that much about controlling his hand. Like, he just wants to get a nice saber out, get some resources, do a little mitigation. If he has to lose 3 of his cards and not do a reroll, well, look at the dice. They're not doing that much damage anyway. Yeah, you can get lucky and do a whole bunch of damage. You know, you could conceivably do 8 or more with specials, but that's pretty unlikely. You're not really going for that. Your goal is to build up. But annihilating hands early can be useful, especially if you have a deck where you can annihilate their hand anyway. If you're doing something like Dooku Jabba with weapons, and you can roll 4 discard or even 2 discard, take 2 cards away, they do an upgrade, now you start smashing at Dooku, it's a lot easier. I think, especially if Dooku has 2 shields, a lot of people go for Kylo Ren. I think often that is the right answer. But what I love about this deck is how flexible you have to be. You know, you really have to be thinking about your opponent's deck, about their strategies, what they can do. Can you lure them into going for Dooku knowing they cannot kill him? If you can, you're going to win the game easy. Do you know they have to go for Kylo so you can load up Dooku? Do you know they should be going for Dooku so you should be loading up Kylo as sort of the lure to get them over there? I just really like how consistent this deck is, how flexible this deck is, and how it sort of has answers and solutions for everything that comes your way. So bottom line is, I think this is a really, really strong deck. I think it's a tier 1 deck. It's not as explosive as a Jango deck, but it also doesn't fall apart quite as easily as one of those decks as well. All right, so here's the deck side by side. The one on the left is the one that was my past deck that I brought into the Tabletop Simulator tournament that I won several tournaments with. The one on the right is the new version. We've been talking about these quite a bit already on my Patreon page, my tier list, just on the page, Patreon Tiny Grimes. Feel free to come on by there, include yourself in the discussions. But if you have not seen these lists yet, get ready. They're going to be in your meta. They're already all over our meta. Anytime a deck list comes up that's been successful, people are going to play it. And be ready, know how to beat this list. It's going to be all over. So I'll see you next time on Tiny Grimes Games, and I really hope you enjoyed the video.